Welcome to the Alcove. I'm Mark Malero. My guest today is Wendy Kopp. She's the founder and CEO of Teach for America, a nonprofit that recruits recent college graduates to teach in America's neediest schools for 2 years. It's a pleasure to have her on the program to discuss this unique organization. Welcome.
Thanks.
I was wondering if you'd just give us an overview of Teach for America. A lot of people have heard of the organization, but what specifically do you do?
We basically work to channel the energy of our country's most promising future leaders in the direction of taking on the problem that we think is among our country's greatest social injustices, which is just the fact that where you're born in our country still does so much to determine your educational prospects and, in turn, your life prospects. So we do that by calling upon these top recent college grads, people of all different academic majors, all different career interests, and getting them to commit 2 years initially to teach in our country's very, highest poverty communities in urban and rural public schools. And the idea is that, because of the leadership skills that they themselves bring, because of the training and professional development that Teach for America provides, they have the potential to have a truly life-changing impact in the lives of the kids they reach. And at the same time, that experience of attaining real success with their kids is just completely transformative for them in different ways.
Right.
And as our future leaders, these are folks who are likely to assume positions of influence, some within education, many in other sectors at every level of policy and such. And they'll take with them just a very rare understanding of this problem and of the changes that really need to occur, fundamental changes, if we're really going to, truly solve the problem.
Right, and it seems a distinction about the program. You're not recruiting teachers per se as a vocation. You're recruiting, in essence, part-time teachers for 2 years, and then they'll go off into their various fields and take that leadership with them.
Yeah, and what we've found is that, kids who are growing up today facing socioeconomic challenges, who are attending today's public system, need every additional person who is willing to go far above and beyond traditional expectations to meet their needs, to put them on a level playing field. So for 2 years, even, in just 2 years, our core members can truly have a significant impact for their kids. And at the same time, we believe it's important that many of them stay, and many of them do. They are, our alums are out there leading the charge in so many communities around reform and education. But at the same time, we think some of them have to go. We'll never solve this deeply entrenched social problem from within schools alone. We need leaders at every level of policy, in every sector, in business, in journalism, et cetera,
right,
who understand what you understand after you've taught successfully in a low-income community.
I was curious also about how you came up with the idea for the program, because I know as an undergraduate you had written a thesis on this. Mm-hmm. How did you go from there to finding the funding, to finding the bureaucracy, putting it all together to create this organization? Was that, how difficult was that?
Well, my greatest asset was my inexperience and my naivete, in all seriousness. I became sort of possessed by this idea, I'd been very focused on the issue of educational inequity, and at the same time, my senior year in college was just really searching for something I wasn't finding in terms of a way to make a real difference in the world right after graduation. And I started sensing that I wasn't alone, that there were thousands of other graduating seniors who were searching for the same thing, and one day just thought, why aren't we being recruited as aggressively to teach in low-income communities as we were being recruited to work on Wall Street?
Right, yeah, exactly.
So that was the idea. I needed a thesis topic. I wrote a very passionate letter to the President of the United States suggesting that he start this.
Wow. Did you get any response?
I got a job rejection letter. I think my letter must have landed in the wrong stack. But, so clearly it wasn't going to happen that way. But I just started thinking, maybe I could start this as a nonprofit. And, I wrote letters to executives who were quoted in this Fortune magazine cover story that came out in the spring of my senior year, which was about their commitment to education reform, and got a seed grant initially. And it was one of these things, the timing was really perfect, and it was an idea that very quickly magnetized just, thousands of others ultimately. we inspired 2,500 people in that first year to apply just through flyers under doors. I mean, a grassroots recruitment campaign before email.
And how long ago would this have been when you were
that
just
was,
getting started?
I graduated in 1989, so 89, 90.
Okay. Yeah. One thing I'm wondering too is how do you gauge the success of each teacher in every sort of scenario, every teaching scenario? How do you monitor it in you know, the idea of just being able to understand the kind of changes that are happening? How do you just put that together?
Well, so we currently have 5,000 Teach for America Corps members in the midst of their 2 years. They're, as you say, they're in 26 communities, very urban communities, remote rural communities. They're in all sorts of different placements. I mean, some of them are teaching pre-K and some of them are teaching seniors in high school, so pre-K to 12.
Yeah.
They come into this, feeling a responsibility to help close the achievement gap for their kids, to help put their students on a level playing field with kids in other communities, which means that they need to affect greater gains, academic gains in any given year than would typically be expected.
Right.
So they diagnose their kids using the best assessments they can find to understand where are they. If they're teaching fourth grade, really where are their kids? And often, I mean, if the national statistics bear out, their kids will enter the fourth grade at the first grade level in low-income communities. Literally the 50% of kids who are still in school in low-income communities as of their senior year in high school have on average an 8th grade, 7th to 8th grade skill level. So they diagnose their kids and they ask themselves, what impact can I have on my kids' academic performance that will have a meaningful impact in my kids' lives? And they set, as we say, big goals, and then they measure their progress against them, and we collect all of that. And, we have a good read on how our Corps members are doing in terms of just their impact on their students' achievement. And that helps us strengthen, and it guides our training and our professional development program as well.
Okay. And I was wondering also, I was curious how traditional educators, teachers, the bureaucracies that go with that, how do they view what you're doing? Because I'm sure there are areas where people would be very welcoming. There must also be areas, though, where there's a lot of resistance. What has been your experience there?
Our experience has been that in the communities where we're working, we are true partners to the schools, the school districts, the unions. I mean, we're a source of people who want to be teaching in the hardest to staff schools, and I think in our communities people are really looking for alternative solutions, since there are huge gaps in the current system, and so
they are open.
So we really, I mean, of course you could always find an exception to the rule, but by and large, I mean, our Corps members would say that the veteran teachers in their schools are their strongest supports. The school principals would say that our Corps members have a really positive influence on their overall school culture. Our greatest fans in the world are principals and local school superintendents. I think as you move away from the context in which we work and you get more removed in terms of having more philosophical discussions, I think Teach for America at some level flies against traditional paradigms and the traditional way people think about how teachers should be prepared and such. And so there's some controversy that swirls, but it hasn't stopped us because there's such strong support in the communities where we work.
Right. And what would that controversy be? Because again, when you innovate, as you're saying, there's always going to be people that, a lot of people would agree with that innovation, but there'll be a lot of people that come from a more traditional background. Yeah. What would that controversy be specifically?
Well, I think, when people think about the teaching profession, the traditional paradigm would be that you go through, as you would if you were going to be a doctor, a campus-based teacher education program, and you prepare for a profession, like a lifelong commitment to teaching. And I think Teach for America, we certainly never started out trying to change the way people think about teaching or to address anything about the teaching profession, actually. I mean, we really started out as a way to address this, what we view as a terribly pressing social need, just the fact that kids in urban and rural areas just plain do not get the educational opportunities they deserve. They're you know, one of the contributing factors is the fact that there are just, you know, there aren't enough highly qualified people who want to teach in urban and rural areas. And so I just saw, you know, on the one hand, all these very talented, driven people who I knew would jump at the chance to teach in those communities,
Right.
and at the same time those needs, and just match the two together. And I think over time, if anything, I've become just all the more convinced that not only in the short run, but in the long run, if we really are serious as a country about solving this problem, I think our best hope for doing it is to channel our country's real future leaders against the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
we will not, we've tried for decades this problem has persisted, and I think until the people with real influence in our country understand what you understand after teaching successfully in a low-income community, which is honestly that this is not a deeply intractable and unsolvable problem. This is a solvable problem. We can
Right.
clearly solve this problem.
Okay.
Because even kids who face all the worst challenges of poverty, who are given the opportunities they deserve, excel, and you see that firsthand, and then you deeply believe it, and you know that, one, we have a responsibility to solve it, and two, you have a very grounded understanding of how to solve it.
I was wondering as well, you know, with that being said, what would be maybe a couple of kind of key examples of maybe teachers or just people that have worked for Teach for America in specific schools, specific situations? I was wondering if you could just, you know, illustrate that for us, maybe just a couple of, you know, really
Sure.
great examples of people that have done really great work and really represent
Sure.
what you're trying to do.
You know, I think about, well, and I guess a couple of different types of examples. I mean, I think about, you know, first of all, a growing percentage of our core members, not every single Teach for America core member, but as we learn more and strengthen our training and support program, you know, many of our core members effect significant academic gains for their kids. And actually, it's been spending time with those folks and learning the lessons of their examples that has done more than anything to sort of drive our future growth.
Okay.
So I think about a woman who you know, is just one example, Katie Pierce, who finished her 2-year commitment this past year here in the South Bronx.
Okay.
She was teaching 6th grade bilingual kids. Her kids came into the year. She was teaching writing and social studies. They came into the year actually reading in English on the pre-K to 1st grade level. So again, these are 6th graders.
Oh, wow.
They were writing, they were sort of all across the map in terms of their writing in Spanish. Some did not know that spaces should be between words. And again, I mean, in
My
6th
goodness.
grade, not knowing basic conventions of writing,
Right.
they hadn't taken any social studies before they got to her class. And, you know, so she looked at a pretty daunting situation and asked herself how she was going to have a meaningful impact in that context, and said, you know what, she came to believe the thing she'd have to do is get her kids to meet 6th grade standards in the subjects she was teaching them in social studies and in writing.
Okay.
Because that would then get them on track to college. So, I mean, it's a
Yeah.
very long story. She did a great deal to you know, work with the parents and with the kids to get them invested in this idea of working harder than they'd ever worked before to
Right.
meet this big important goal. She was extreme. I mean, if you walked into her classroom, you'd feel the sense of urgency. She was just maximizing every second she had. And then she did a whole lot else. I mean, she was just relentless around all the obstacles. You know, she didn't have enough time, so she figured out how to get the kids there early and get them to stay late and all.
Right.
But you fast forward to the end of the year, and her kids met 6th grade standards in writing and social studies. You know,
Wow.
parents saying at the end of the year, literally, I mean, just this year completely changed their conception of what their kids would do. I mean, convincing them that, in fact, my kid is going to go to college instead of, you know, cut fruit trees as I do, et cetera.
Wow. Okay.
So I guess, you know, that example tells us a lot of things. I mean, one, you see from that you see incredible disparities that persist in our country. First of all, when you think about 6th graders and where they came in, and you just think, this is in America, you know, which aspires to be a place of equal opportunity.
Yeah.
But then you see against that just huge possibilities. You know, you realize, I mean, Katie Pierce realizes, like, she knows what most people in America don't know. Most people think, well, we have the outcomes we have in low-income communities because the parents don't care. The kids aren't motivated, like all the prevailing
Yeah, the
assumptions.
obvious. Yeah.
And yet, if you asked Katie, she would never say that. I mean, she watched her kids work harder than kids in most communities would work, you know.
Yeah.
So you realize that it's possible, and then you realize, too, like, even just for 2 years, I mean, this was a woman 2 years out of college when she accomplish those results, and she accomplished very similar results in her first year. And you just realize her 2 years, I mean, even if she did leave, and she actually, is quite possibly, a lifer in this field, but even if she did leave, those 2 years were such an incredible gift for her kids and their families, and certainly have helped influence her career path as well.
Well, it's interesting too, because it seems like, again, the key to the program is the utility. It's about doing something now, not about these, there's all the prevailing social causes, but as you're saying, you have an ability to reverse a trend by action.
Yeah.
That seems to be the absolute key.
I think that there's that, and then, I mean, the other thing I would say is that, I mean, you can really see evidence in communities where Teach for America has been placing a steady stream of people for, a decade or so. You feel something different is going on in those communities, and it's being driven by these Teach for America alums who are generally in their 20s and 30s, and I could talk about any community from Oakland to Newark to New Orleans to, maybe the best example right now is Washington, D.C., where there's a new schools chancellor who's a Teach for America alum, who herself moved her kids over 2 years from the 13th percentile to the 90th percentile against the national norm.
Oh, man.
She's extraordinary, but she also just has the deep conviction that comes along with that. Her deputy chancellor is a Teach for America alum, a majority of her senior team, 10% of the school principals, one of the 2 right hands to the mayor for education policy, one of the 2 newly elected school board, essentially state board members there, are Teach for America alums. And I just think about the fact that these folks came through when we were bringing in 500 people a year nationally, 50 people a year into DC, and now, we feel a great sense of urgency to grow our impact and have succeeded in that at some level. I mean, we brought in 3,000 people last year. We'll bring in many more this year. And I just think we're going to start seeing an exponential growth in the impact that we feel from our alumni.
I was just going to say, that's what I was wondering about, is where are you right now in terms of recruitment? Are you looking actively for teachers? Do you have enough teachers? If somebody's watching this and obviously they're interested in the program, what would you say to them to do?
Well, we're in the midst of a really aggressive growth plan. We think scale is huge in this. Every additional recruit is one more teacher and one more future leader. And also, if we're really going to help tip a prevailing ideology and change the priorities of a country, we need to reach the point where not just a few, but many of our future leaders have this experience in common. So we are, we've grown from 1,000 core members to 5,000 in 6 years. We should be at about 6,500 by next year. We're trying to get to 8 or ultimately, 10,000 in the coming few years.
And is it difficult to get the funding and just the organization in place to support that growth? Is that a challenge to the organization, or are you getting the kind of support that you need?
Well, we always need more funding.
Sure, fair enough.
But we also have had a great deal of success in building the organizational capacity and the financial support to grow. And actually, as we grow, we're getting better. We're able to invest more in training, more in professional development for the core members, more in the kind of ongoing support that we give our alums to try to accelerate their leadership as a force for change. So things are going well. I mean, we never have enough funding, but we always welcome new funders.
Fair enough. Well, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and thanks for joining us. We'll see you again soon.